Welcome to the Bold Podcast. I'm Todd Birch, entrepreneur, mental fitness coach, and keynote speaker. I believe every person has a spark, but life, pressure, and doubt have a way of dimming it. Here's the good news. You can reignite it at any moment. That's what this podcast is all about. When you fuel your spark, everything changes. Let's ignite it together. Welcome back, listeners, to The Bold. I'm excited about today's conversation with the amazing Kathy Sullivan. Kathy is the principal and owner of Talent Principles, an organizational development consultant, executive coach, and author. Today, we're going to talk about leadership development, creating and sustaining change, emotional intelligence, and her awesome book, Moms Eat First. So, Kathy, welcome to the Bold Podcast, my friend.
Thank you for having me.
I'm so excited. This is an important conversation that we need to have today, especially the book. So you've been doing this for a long time, 25 years, leadership development, organizational development. Your education and certifications are off the charts. 10 plus. I was adding them up. I'm like, oh my gosh, she's certified in every single thing. So you're definitely a lifelong learner,
yes,
which I love. And you've devoted to the craft, which I can appreciate and I respect. At some point, you decided that you needed to write this book. So tell us what happened. Why this book? Why now? And this was a couple of years ago. It was 2024 when you published this book.
Yes.
So after COVID, after things settled, whatever to normal, whatever that means, and you said, "Okay, it's time. It's time to get this out there." I have this burning desire, this burning message on my heart that I need to get out. So tell us a little bit about the journey to get there, and then we'll go into what the book is all about. Because I want to make sure that we spend time on this because I feel like it's a great book, and I think it's an important.
Thanks, Josh. Well, I think the journey started really throughout my career. So, early on in my career, I started out in human resources, and really throughout the 20 plus years I was in HR, I focused a lot on organizational development initiatives. So I was really helping facilitate change within an organization. I've worked in a variety of industries, and I think the catalyst for the book really started with my move from Southern California to Ohio. Yes. So
I would want to do that. I think that's the burning questions that I want to ask.
A lot. Let me say I love where I am now. California was great, but I really love living in the Cleveland area. There's so many wonderful things about it. But really, the catalyst was twofold. My mom, I grew up in upstate New York. So my mom at the time had been diagnosed with cancer, and I wanted to get back to family. And two, I was pregnant with my son and was going to be, taking that journey essentially on my own. So I really wanted to get back to family. My sister lives here in Cleveland, which is why I chose Ohio. And a lot of my family's still in upstate New York. So that was really part of the catalyst. And, the book I started writing before the pandemic. The pandemic really, I think, solidified my ideas and really helped me to hone in on those 5 principles that I talk about. But there's 3 reasons that I wrote the book. One was obviously my personal journey and my experiences as a parent, a single parent, dealing with some of the challenges that I talk about in the book. 2 was so many conversations I had with other women. So, as a coach and having led some women in leadership programs, I have firsthand insight into, some of the journeys that other women are experiencing, particularly moms. And then the 3rd reason was a lot of the research. There's been so many studies that have been done that, have findings about women bearing the brunt of a lot of the responsibility in the home and then trying to manage careers. And I felt it was important to create this book using my experience, providing some of the tools that I have and use with my clients. I wanted to give women agency.
Agency. I love that. Give women agency. How has the book been received?
I hope well. It's, triggered a lot of conversations with people. I've done, various engagements to have opportunities to work with organizations, as well as I actually went on to create a health forum as a result of it. So last year I launched Moms Eat First, Prioritize Your Health Forum. So this will be the second year. I launched it around Mother's Day last year, and this was in Cleveland. And this was an opportunity to bring women together, to create space for them to be educated around women's health issues, and to give them space to really prioritize themselves and what they needed to take care of themselves and to connect with others. So it was really about empowering them to create the change they need to prioritize their health. And that, I don't talk about that in the book. That was kind of something that happened for me a couple of years. It was probably a year ago now. I was sitting in the living room with my daughter, and she just kind of asked me the question, "Mom, are you okay?" She had been noticing some things in me, and I just wasn't showing up the way that I had wanted to, and I wasn't. So I went out to see, I went and saw a functional medicine doctor, and she got me back on track. So that experience really generated the idea for me that I wanted other women to, be able to have this information and to understand where they were on their own journeys and to prioritize their health. So
the conversation with your daughter happened after the book.
Yes.
And was the impetus of this conference.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, interesting. So still work to be done.
Yes.
Right? And so it's one thing we talk a lot about embracing change, and that's all me. That's all I talk about. So I'm happy to dig in and spend a whole hour talking about that. But it's also about sustaining that change, right? So it's two really different things, in my opinion, in the way that I teach it. And that's kind of case in point. You embraced it, right? You made the decision to change, wrote the book, went through a whole lot of different things to get where you're at. And then your daughter says, "Wait a minute, we're still not there yet." Yeah, I see you. And good for her to, I don't know, how old was she?
She's 20 now. So it was, a year or so ago. Wow. She was home from school, from college. And, I think the hard part with that is we don't always recognize the impact we're having on others, right? So from a leadership perspective or from a parental perspective, when we aren't taking care of ourselves, it shows up in not so pretty ways. And if we don't listen to and are open to the people around us who are noticing we're not operating how we typically do, then we miss the opportunity.
Right. Yeah, where to go? I'm excited. I'm like a kid in a candy store because I love this topic. And so let's talk about change. This is really important because there's all kinds of books, podcasts, classes, master classes, courses. You could spend days, right, gathering the insights about change and how to go about it. And we can go back to the old adage, right? You can lead a horse to water, but you can't force them to drink it. So how do you, in your experience with leaders, moms, how do you get them to, because you have to make that choice, right? Mm-hmm. In my experience, unfortunately, it takes a trigger before somebody can really say, okay, maybe I should change, right? And that trigger, unfortunately, is usually traumatic. Maybe it's a near-death experience. Maybe it's a loss of a loved one. And I know for me, I had triggers when I was younger, and that was my fork in the road moment. I still had to make the choice, but I had the trigger. I got beat down literally so bad that it was time to make a change. And you went through a tremendous amount of adversity too. And your mom passing, I'm sorry about your mom passing. And that was, I believe, your trigger, right? And so my question to you is, how do we get people to change? Because my mission is to get more people to change, to embrace change, because when you do, the world is so beautiful. You can't pour into others if your cup isn't full, right?
So I'm maybe going to answer this a couple of different ways. So what I find in organizations is leaders often do a great job around establishing the technical path to creating the change that's needed. The idea or the example I often share is if you need to implement a new technology, right, on January 1st, we have to create what is the plan to make that happen.
Right. Change management.
Right. So we often create, the milestones around what do we need to execute on to make that happen. But what organizations often don't prioritize or even spend much time on is what is the people plan around that. So we have to think about who does the change impact? How will those individuals respond? Do they have the tools and the resources to execute and do what we're asking them to do differently? So that requires a lot of critical thinking. It requires input from various stakeholders, and it requires a plan, right? To ensure essentially that whoever is going to be using that system come January 1st, that they have the confidence, the skills, the knowledge to actually use the system on January 1st. Now that's might be pie in the sky thinking, but that's really what I think is really critical, is using both that technical and that people plan. And, you point out, I think what's important is to really understand what's going to motivate people to want to change.
There we go. Here's
right. So, we have to think about the psychology behind it. And, you also pointed out, like for me in writing the book, I had to reflect on my experiences and really think about what got me through this time. And thankfully, I had a lot of the tools and I had the awareness. And a lot of this is really founded in emotional intelligence, right? We have to be willing to look at ourselves, look at what we're doing well and what we're not doing so well. We have to look at the people around us and what is it going to take for us to move forward. So that motivation piece is big, and that can be hard to do at scale when you're trying to instill, mass changes or large changes in an organization. But that's why leadership is so critical. And it's not just, top leaders, executives, but leader buy-in at every level so that those messages are cascaded and get down to the individuals who need to execute the change.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is the conversation that I've been having all year, honestly. Wrapped around, I just spoke with a change management consultant, same as you've been in business 20, 30 years. And it all centered around leadership.
Yeah.
It all starts with the people, and it starts at the top and it drips down to everybody else, right? The Gallup polls show if the managers are disengaged, the employees are disengaged. And I think it's the same thing with change. If your managers, leaders at whatever level are not bought in and taking a look inward. And that's the thing. And especially with men, let's be honest, the resistance to look inward as a male is high. And those who have an extremely high EQ are going to be the best leaders out there, especially now. EQ needs to be a number one priority in every leadership development program, because we are in the largest disruption of change we've ever seen, and it's not going to get any easier anytime soon.
Yeah.
So you either become adaptable and see change as an opportunity, or if you keep fighting it, you're going to be miserable, and honestly, you're going to be out of work.
Yeah, I think it does. Capacity is a big barrier. So, in organizations where there's constant change and people are experiencing change fatigue and they're operating so quickly and so reactively, if you don't have the time and the space and the awareness to realize you need to step back and change how you're operating, it can be very easily to move to burnout, right? And you end up not getting the results that you need, probably on various fronts. But that is a challenge I find for many organizations now, is we need to create space for critical thinking, for proper conversations, for dialogue.
Right.
In the midst of change, sometimes it's top down and this is what we're doing. So, that feedback loop of, how are we going to do this? What are the barriers to it? And working collaboratively to make that happen, I think, are really important.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And you say space, and space is time, right? It all comes down to time, which we don't have enough of.
And having the right stakeholders in the room, and that is, I think, it's different for your organization, but I think it comes down to, leaders ensuring that they're pulling their teams into some of that, decision making or ideation about the change.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, this goes back to, so we'll talk about the book, and then maybe we'll just get into it, because there are 5 key principles in this book, Monzi first. And the first one is reflection, which we just talked about.
Yeah.
So let's talk Let's talk about reflection, because I'm a huge, huge fan of reflection, and it's part of my coaching as well. I think if we were to say, is there one thing that you can do today, right? One simple, small shift, micro shift, small step, whatever you want to call it, to start building that EQ and get ready for change. I believe it's that self-awareness which comes with reflection. But that takes time. Yeah. You have to make the time to do that.
Yeah. Yes. And I think again, it's the time and space to reflect, but it's also asking yourself the right questions. It's not about ruminating on the past or even the present necessarily, or, worrying about the future, but we have to kind of take a step back to look at, what is the big picture? What am I being asked to do? What is my resistance to it? How am I operating that maybe aren't congruent with the way that I want to be operating? I mean, context matters. So it's dependent upon, the change that you are trying to create for yourself, or that your organization is asking you to do. But that's probably one of the most common things that I find is, even with my clients and leaders, don't always prioritize that time to reflect.
Yeah.
And sometimes that is a matter of looking at your broader business goals, right? It's looking at patterns of data. So there's various ways in which you can spend that time reflecting, but it really is about just getting broader perspective.
Yeah, I'd love to provide some tips. And you're right. You said data, and my friend Scott always says, it's all data. Data is all around us,
yes.
Right? All day long, there's data, but you have to be open to it. You have to be in that growth mindset enough to say, okay, I'll take it, and then I'll reflect on it. And you have to give yourself that space. So for me, some tactics are like, get into a cadence. This is a habit. It's all habits and patterns. So what can you do to build the time? You actually have to block and tackle in your calendar to put whatever, 15 minutes every Monday, or start or bookend, right? Or every Friday at end of day, whatever works for you and your schedule and your commitments in life. Or maybe you do it. A lot of people I know do it on Sundays, and that's when I do it as well.
Yes.
But I also reflect every single day. So I have a meditation / prayer / gratitude practice every morning.
Yeah.
Now, that took a long time to build that into a habit, but I'm going to tell you, man, my day, I'm set for the day, right? Because I'm not focused on what I don't have. I've just reflected on what I'm grateful for, and I'm being present in the moment, ready for the data I'm going to receive.
That's
that
right.
day.
I do think that is a best practice. I don't do that. I do take time to reflect. And really, it's about creating time to focus, I think, right? And knowing yourself and how you operate. I think that meditation is really important. As far as tactics and tips are concerned, it's easy to tell people to create, right, 15, 30 minutes a week, but inevitably life and work get in the way. I think this comes back to the self-awareness is you have to have systems in place, right? The right systems that work for you.
Systems.
For some, it's going to be Sunday night, looking at the last week, looking at your week ahead. What are the priorities, right? I think those are some good systems and practices that people can instill. But inevitably, like as a single parent, as much as I might have that time calendared, other priorities are going to come up. So it's a constant negotiation with your time.
Mm.
And, I think that's where sometimes we have to recognize that we have to make hard decisions and say no to things that maybe we really want to do, whether that's, initiatives on the business side, maybe not so much depending on your circumstances. I obviously have control over what I'm going to be working on as a business owner, but maybe it's time with your friends, whatever the case may be. I find I'm constantly like reprioritizing my time on a consistent basis. And I think that's a system that works for me. But I also maybe don't operate and think the way that others do. I do think, I don't want to say an anomaly necessarily, but my cadence and how I work and how I prefer to work may not work for other people.
Right. Right. And I think the key here is to find your system.
Yes.
But create that system because a system is a habit. It's a pattern.
Yes.
And that's what we need. You can't, the days go by so quick. And now we're into February, right? And everyone's like, oh my gosh, what happened to January? Well, I have a cadence at the end of the month, like do a review. How was the month? And not just on business goals and strategies, but how was life?
Right. Right.
It sucked. It was a hard month, right? Let's just be honest. So it's not all wins, but that's data. But I also noticed it was rough because of the winter and the snow that we got. It forced me to slow down.
Yes.
And slowing down allowed me to reflect a little bit more.
Yeah.
So, but you brought up barriers. And I think that is a really big component to this is putting up the barriers.
Yeah. As you were talking, Todd, the one thing that came to mind and kind of comes back to like the motivation piece is people need to really understand like what gets them motivated to take action. As a business owner, what I've noticed, obviously, and not working with a broader team anymore, I have to be diligent around collaboration, being part of like a business community and having those connections with others, because that's how I vet ideas, how I validate ideas, how I get others to challenge my ideas. So that's part of the accountability that works for me, and I think is really important for people to understand. So to tell, right, is coming back to the idea of taking time, scheduling time to reflect. Sometimes you might need to do that and then ensure that you have someone that's going to hold you accountable to it, whether that's a coach or you're meeting with a colleague to do that. So it's building in these reinforcements, if you will, that are going to help facilitate you taking action on them.
Yeah, I'm all in. Everyone needs an accountability partner. I talk about it a lot on the show. I believe that every single person needs to have a coach, should have a coach. And I don't mean me, I'm not trying to sell myself, but I believe we all need that person.
Everyone deserves one for sure.
Most of the time, it's not our partner or spouse, or not a colleague, right? It needs to be kind of a third party, an unbiased, somebody that can be a really great listener, but also hold you accountable. Say, hey, Kathy, hey, Todd, you said you were going to do this. Well, let's talk about what happened. You fell off the rails. What happened? Now let's get back on it. It's okay.
Yeah.
It's data. Let's learn and let's see how we can come around it maybe from a different angle. But all about the barriers, patterns, habits, accountability. It's all great, but you need the motivation, and I think in my research and experience coaching, one of the questions that keeps popping up is, what's in it for me? What's in it for me? Especially when you're at a company, and particularly a large company that says, hey, we're going to implement this change. We're not asking for feedback. This is what we're doing. So get on board and here we go. So you have a lot of resistance because of a number of things, right? We can talk about the psychology behind it and fear and change fatigue and discomfort. But at the end of the day, we need to align it. We need them to see how it benefits them.
Right. The wisdom. Yeah.
When you can do that, when you can tie that together, man, it's beautiful.
Very
and you're on
much so.
board and you're just all rowing in the same direction. So,
And at times, it's because again, I think those are all really important points. But there also, I think, comes a point where people need to either accept the change or decide to go. Right. And that can be really hard. And I do believe this is driven by leadership because the messaging is really important in how you communicate the change. There should be thought put into ensuring that changes are messaged in a way that people are clear on what the vision is and what is the change that they're being asked to make, but also how that change impacts them. And that, again, comes back to kind of the different layers of leadership and their responsibilities. But, inevitably, there are going to be individuals that aren't bought into the change for whatever reason. And that could be not as simple, but an example that I often hear from clients is I'm taking on all this additional responsibility. We're not doing promotions. We're not giving, additional compensation right now. So why should I do this? So again, in that example, we have to think beyond ourselves. We have to think about our careers because sometimes those additional responsibilities that we're taking on actually are going to help us propel us in our career. Mm-hmm. That can be a lateral change too. Sometimes it's not always right, a trajectory upward, if you will. So, when you talk about growth mindset, that's really an example of working with a coach or getting that broader perspective of how can we look at this differently instead of through kind of a fear-based lens is how do we look at this with opportunity and how this can actually benefit me in the long run? And what can I learn from this experience?
Yep, absolutely. And that's it ties directly into the motto of positive intelligence.
Yes, yeah.
Which is find the gift and opportunity in every situation because it's there. It might not be there today, it might not be there tomorrow, it might be a month from now, but it's there. You just have to be open. And to be open means you need to be in a growth mindset. You need to be curious, so on and so forth.
Yeah, and the other thing that I find, Todd, I think is people need time to process. It seems easy, and I think many times organizations, leaders kind of want and expect people to just comply. But compliance typically isn't sustainable, right? We want buy-in. We want people motivated around the change because that's going to sustain the change versus you just being told you need to do this.
Yeah, I don't like that. I don't like
Most people don't.
comply. That's a old HR word, right?
Yeah.
Comply. You must comply.
Well, there's some things we have to comply with, right?
But when it comes to some massive change, I don't think that's going to fly. And I think we're seeing that, right? We're seeing that in the polls. We'll be right back after a quick message. Hey, it's Todd again. Right now, leaders are facing unparalleled challenges with burnout, disengagement, and rising stress across our teams. And that's why mental fitness matters more than ever. Mental fitness is the ability to respond to pressure with clarity and confidence instead of stress, negativity, or self-doubt. It's about building that self-command, especially when it matters most. Through the Positive Intelligence Program, or PQ for short, I work with leaders and teams to reduce burnout, strengthen resilience, and create a culture where people feel supported, engaged, and capable of performing at their best. This neuroscience-backed program helps teams shift from reactive to resilient and turns change into a catalyst for growth and innovation. Look, I've been practicing PQ for years, and it fundamentally changed how I lead, work, and live. It's transformed my life. If you're curious whether PQ could support you or your team, I invite you to visit toddbirch.com to learn more about this transformational program. Now, back to the show. Let's talk more about the book. So we talked about the first principle, which is reflection. Next is rediscovering.
Yes.
So let's talk about rediscovering a little bit.
Yes.
Actually, maybe let's just go through the next four principles, just about a high level.
So rediscovery, so reflection obviously is taking time, kind of inventory, if you will, around like where you are. Rediscovery is really about dreaming. It's about thinking about possibilities. It's really related to the growth mindset, if you will. Many times when we are experiencing change or want change for ourselves, we don't always allow ourselves to dream. So what I find many times is we focus on constraints. So an example I talked about in the book, like years ago, I've worked in industry for 20, 25 years, and I always had this idea of wanting to go into consulting. But the one constraint I always told myself is I can't travel 80% of the time. So my assumption, and obviously a lot of consulting, roles require a lot of travel. But that assumption that I had really prevented me from exploring that. So rediscovering is really about opening up your mind to all of the possibilities of what you want for yourself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love that. And then we come to reset.
So reset this is really about getting clarity around what you want.
Right. So that kind of plays off of rediscovering and just kind of refines it.
Yeah, we have to, but part of the reflection too, right? That first principle is about really understanding what's important to you. Mm-hmm. And drowning out sometimes the noise around you of what other people tell you should want or should do or be. Mm-hmm. So as it relates to the book, a lot of that is like this super mom syndrome and what a good mom looks like. And that can be hard. These are kind of societal expectations too. And right. On top of the influences that many of us had growing up from our parents or whoever raised us. So the resetting is really about getting clear. And I find, unfortunately, I'm doing a presentation tomorrow and through some of the survey feedback prior to it. And I hear this from other women as well. When I ask them what they want for themselves, they don't know. So that's why the rediscovery is so important. But for us to really measure success and to get to where we want to go, I think it's really important to reset kind of what we want for ourselves. So it's getting that clarity.
Mm-hmm. I love that. And then once you reset, you can reclaim.
This is related to change, right? So the purpose of this principle is inevitably when we try to instill change in our life, we are going to experience barriers, whether that is self-induced because of something we are doing, but we also have to remember the people around us are big influences. So, maybe an example is if you are trying to lose weight and you don't anticipate the influences your family, your friends, right, your colleagues might have, whether that's every Friday night at home, we order pizza and we get ice cream, or at work every Friday, they bring in all these bagels and all this food. Like we have to realize these outside influences that we have and kind of anticipate it's in those moments where it's going to be the hardest that we need to reclaim what we want for ourselves so we can sustain the change.
Yeah, absolutely. And that can be tough. That's a tough one. And now you can release.
So the last principle is really about letting go of what you can't control. And there's, these principles are intended for people to interpret them based on their own experiences and what they want for themselves. They're not meant to be prescriptive. But this last one can mean a couple of different things for people. For me, it was, in part letting go of what other people think. It was in part of letting go of this idea of what kind of mom I was supposed to be, what kind of person I was supposed to be. I was raised in a very rather religious home. My mom was very religious, and those, values and belief systems really instilled a good foundation in me. But at the same time, I think it created some challenges for me as I navigated life. And that I think also was part of why I wrote the book.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and these all start with RE.
Intentionally.
Right.
Right. So it's iterative.
Right. To repeat.
Yeah.
It's a cycle.
Very much so.
Right. And the thing is, we're never done. This is, I've said this before on the show, but this is an infinite game. Yes, there is an end, right? Orbitally, there is an end, but before that end, it's an infinite game. And we just keep iterating and collecting data and just getting a little bit better. At least that's what I teach, and I feel like that is what keeps people growing, happy, engaged, and then able to pour into everybody they serve, whether that's their kids, their family, their friends, their colleagues, their direct reports, their company, right? It's not rocket science at the end of the day, but our brains are playing a lot of games.
Yeah, there's a couple of slides that I often share in the presentations that I do. And the first slide is really a straight line, like moving an upward trajectory. Like that was the vision I had for myself when I was younger about my career, about how life was going to go. But the second slide has all these zigzags on it, right? And the high points are the promotions, right? Starting my business, having my children, getting married, whatever you want to, refer to. But the low points were the big challenges I had in life and the times of adversity. And it's really those moments, I think, where I learned the most about myself. Mm-hmm. And it was those changes that I experienced. So
I would agree. I mean, that's where resilience is built.
Yes.
And if we don't have resilience, that mental fitness, right, then we're going to be disappointed. We're going to be angry. We're going to be in survival mode, overcome by fear. And we're just not going to be the best people we can be.
Yeah.
And certainly then not able to pour into others. So there's definitely a trickle down effect from this. Yeah, for sure. Well, this book is a great book.
Thank you.
I highly recommend it. Kathy puts herself out there and her whole story. You went through a lot of adversity, and especially when you say, well, look at this. This is what society says my life is supposed to be. Married at 25, job, 2 kids, dog named Spot, white picket fence, nice car, right? That's what they say, and it's supposed to be as fit as a fiddle after having 2 kids. That's not what it's like, and, social media can be a detriment in that regard. So just staying grounded and having a good group, a good tribe, people that have those same core values, I found is really important.
Absolutely. I mean, that community is a big piece of it. I think, I have a lot of great memories from living in California, but the environment there is very different than it is here. Where I am here in the Cleveland, Ohio area is very similar to where I grew up. And I think that's a big part of the community. But yeah, I think you need to surround yourself with people that are going to support you and what you want for yourself and help you reinforce the positives.
Mm-hmm. I agree. It's interesting. I was curious to get your take. I assume you're familiar with Simon Sinek.
Yes.
In his book, Leaders Eat Last. So when I heard the title of your book, I was like, oh, it sounds familiar. But when you look, if you've read it, or if you look at the summary of that book, it's quite different.
Very much.
And I would say, I'll put myself out there that I don't agree with that. I don't agree that leaders should eat last. I feel like what you're saying, and you're saying moms in particular, because we're going to dig into that in a minute. But I just think people in general, yes, we're parents, and it is the most incredible thing in the world. But we can't be great anything if we don't take care of ourselves. Mm-hmm. We can't. We have to. And I don't care what your commitments are. You can find 5 minutes to do something for yourself. Just pause, walk, gratitude, pray, read, journal. Just start small with something. You can do it. You have to take that time and own that for yourself, or you'll go crazy and you'll lose yourself, right? To the point where you ask the question, what do you want? I don't know.
Yeah.
Because I've been doing everything for everybody else. I've lost myself, and I've seen that. And as we were talking before the show, I have so many friends and colleagues in my network of women leaders and a lot of single moms. Mm-hmm. And man, that is like 3 jobs. And I don't think people realize what goes into that. Why are they struggling to get to an 8:00 meeting? Well, that's because they got a hell lot more to get done before half the other people do, right? Because they don't have the support, and they have to get the kids, and they have to get themselves ready, right? There's a lot of things that go into the preparation. So I don't know. Sorry, I went on a little tangent there, but.
Well, I think Simon Sinek's book I have read that, and the overall sense and I think premise of that is that we have to take care of the people that report to us, right?
Yeah, and I agree with that. So let me just say, I don't disagree with that, but not for sacrificing our own.
Well, and it's a mindset, right? I think the examples and his experience and the journey and the stories he tells are, relatable. And, coming back to the book of Moms Eat First, I was intentional with the title, obviously, as I knew it might stir some reaction, because of this kind of idea that moms are, often put their kids and their spouses or whomever, right, others ahead of their own needs. And I think it's important to state, like, this is not about sacrificing the needs of others, right? Our children and their needs obviously vary and they change as they get older, but this is not about sacrificing the needs of your family to put yourself ahead of them, but it's really the idea of the oxygen mask.
Absolutely.
The example I shared with you with my daughter earlier was I was so busy with helping her with college and working on the business. And my son last year was diagnosed with high functioning autism on top of ADHD. Like, those things were requiring a lot of doctor's appointments. And, I was prioritizing everyone else's needs, and I wasn't realizing the impact it was having on me. And thankfully, my daughter, right, had the courage to kind of hold the mirror up to me. So
I love that she was able to do that. And that, I think, is a testament to the type of relationship.
Very much so, right? And it wasn't an easy thing, but it comes back to, like, we have to be open to feedback from others around us. Yeah. We have to be willing to look at ourselves and really ask ourselves the hard questions. This idea of Moms Eat First really is a shift in mindset. It's a paradigm shift. I had a woman reach out to me yesterday, and she's not a mom, but she talked about the principles and how it was amazing to hear this transformation that she made over the last 6 months since we worked together. And it really was a mindset shift. she was more confident and she cared less about what other people, thought. And she was very clear around what she wanted, and she articulated that to her leaders at work. So these principles apply to anyone, regardless of whether or not you're a mom or a woman. So I just think we have to be open to looking at things differently.
Yes, I agree. And as I was reading it, I mean, it was very applicable to me in my journey.
Good.
And what I have done, and some new ideas for what I will try to be.
I'm glad to hear that.
The best version, of myself. But I think, the message is that, like you said, the data's there. We have a challenge here with women eating last most of the time, right? And we can go back to some great examples that you have in the book about just, let's talk about dinner. Yeah.
Well, I think I will add, there's a generational, right, difference here. So how I was raised and the belief systems that were instilled in me and what I'm trying to instill in my kids, that will continue to evolve, right? I mean, I can already see and hear some of the conversations from younger women, including my daughter and her friends even. And there's data that shows that women, right, families are not having as many kids as they used to. So it is shifting. And, I also think it's important to add that how I operate and how I parent my kids is going to be very different from how other people do. And it's really important that women and their families establish what's right for them, whether that's working, right, both parents working, one parent working, that's going to be dependent upon the demographics within the home. But I think that speaks to this idea of comparing yourself to others. We have to get really clear around what's important to us as individuals and make sure that we're on a path to achieving that, despite what others think for us, right?
Yep. And we need to be able to have those difficult conversations. And let's just take, a marriage and being able to talk to your spouse or your husband and say, hey, I've done some deep reflection here. I need some time. I'm doing everything here, man. Can you help me out? And I do a lot at the house, and I'm not putting myself on a pedestal, but that's just how I grew up watching my dad clean the house. That's what I saw. My dad was cleaning the house. And I grew up, I did a lot of my first job was a janitor. So I cleaned. I like it. It's therapeutic, but it's a win-win. So I'm also helping, I'm contributing. We split things 50-50. So I think it's being able to have that conversation and being with somebody that will listen and be able to have it and just say, oh, well, I'm sorry. How can I help? We're both working. We're both taking care of the kids. It's a different time.
Yeah.
And we're all in this together. So I think, it just needs to be a conversation. And I think we need to hang that reflection time. I created a document a couple of years ago called a life audit tool. It was a little too much, I think, for a lot of people, but I changed it this past year. I call it Wins and Wisdom. Same thing. It's a reflection tool, just a little softer and more focused on the lessons, right? And not necessarily what you need to work on. It's just a different approach. All that to say, we go through this as a family. And my wife and my daughter's 14, they were totally against it. And I said, look, just be open to it. Trust me. We had an hour and a half drive up to Sandusky, and they're like, oh, this wasn't so bad. And I learned something about myself. But we're all learning about each other, so it's prompts about your life and all those major pillars in your life. So just getting yourself the time to reflect, but also being able to have those conversations.
You make a very good point. I do think the conversations are really important. I talk about a couple in the book. this presentation tomorrow, I mentioned this came up for in some of the survey responses of how do I have conversations with whether that's colleagues, my boss, or my spouse. I don't have to worry about that now being married right now. So decision making falls solely on me. But even with that, the example you shared, there's a level of buy-in and getting others motivated to want to participate. And it's easier said than done. I really, the one thing I encourage everyone to really consider is strengthening your negotiating skills. Because that's really what these conversations are. When the example I talk about in the book, when I was living in Southern California and when my mom became ill and I was pregnant with my son, I made the decision to move to Ohio to be closer to family. And, I had to have a conversation with my boss. I was leaving my job, a job that I loved very much. I was working with a mentor of mine. I knew I was going to disappoint a lot of people. I had to have a conversation with my ex-husband to say I'm moving across the country. So, and with family, it was across the board, but the work, right, that I had to do to get to that point and the conviction that I had. And also, there was probably not much anyone could do to change my mind. I knew what I needed to do for myself and for my family, but I was prepared for that negotiation.
Mm-hmm.
So,
and that's a big step.
It is.
I read that. I'm like, wow.
But it takes preparation, right?
Yeah. Right. It takes preparation. It's not something that is done on a whim, certainly. That's, move across country and uplifting everything.
Yeah.
But talk about change. You went through
a lot of changes at once.
One time, and change fatigue is real. Our brain gets exhausted. We just can't mentally, physically, for sure. Right. So kudos to you for just living, breathing it, doing it, making the decisions, and then writing the book and putting it all out there. Not a lot of people would have done that either. You really do share not all the details, but enough to get a glimpse into Kathy Sullivan's life. And I think that this is going to be a movement.
I hope so. The one thing that really struck me in hindsight, Todd, was, the fact that I probably too have ADHD like my son. So that as I look back at my career and just how I operated, constantly moving, having ideas, wanting to execute things. But really at the end of the day, I think I realized I was operating in fight or flight for a long time. So this comes back to change and how we respond to change and what our brains need to process change, to make good decisions, is that time to reflect and step back and really think about things critically and to utilize data is really important. And like you said, the slowing down, the mind, right? Kind of shifting that mindset, and meditation can really help with that. Yeah, I can. That's a tough one for a lot of people. It's on my list for 3 years before I finally said, all right, I'll do it. I'm going to fail, but I'll do it anyhow. And now I can't envision my day without it. Good. And now it's a habit. Well, Kathy, this conversation has been amazing. Gosh, we could keep going for hours because I just love talking about change. But so we're coming to a close here. If you could leave every listener with one message about growth or self-prioritization, leading with purpose, what would that be? This is kind of your mic drop. No pressure. I think the main idea, that I've been sharing with people is when you give the best to yourself, you can give the best of yourself.
I love it. That's how we end.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here. Thanks for spending time with us on the Bolt Podcast. If today's conversation sparked something for you, please share it with someone who could use it. That ripple is how we create impact and light the way for others. Remember, growth doesn't come from giant leaps. It comes from small, intentional shifts that build over time. Ignite your spark, fuel the fire, and light the way. We'll see you next time, my friends.